Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 5 NFL predictions. So last week, I didn't have a great week going 8-7, and that brings my record on the season to 43-20. But kicking things off this week on Thursday Night Football, we have the Rams hosting the 49ers. And this is a big early season game for both teams, as both these teams got off to good starts this year and are sitting at 3-1. For the Rams, they're coming in off a nice win over the Colts, and last week for the 49ers, they lost their first game of the season as they lost to the Jaguars. But on the offensive side of the ball for the 49ers, they've been okay so far this season, scoring about 20 points per game. Although I do think this could be a tough game for them offensively, because the 49ers, they're extremely banged up, as Brock Purdy, Juwan Jennings, and Ricky Pearsall are all out for this game. So Mac Jones will be getting the start at quarterback for the 49ers, and it's going to be his third start already, as he started in weeks 2 and 3, and he was pretty solid in those games, throwing for 281 yards per game, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. But with the combination of the injuries, plus they face a great Rams defense, I just don't see the 49ers having a ton of offensive success. Now, on the offensive side for the Rams, they've been good. They're scoring 25 points per game, and their passing attack has been elite, as Matthew Stafford is second in the NFL in passing yards, and Puka Nacua is leading the NFL in receiving yards. Although the Rams offense, they face a good 49ers defense that is allowing just 18.8 points per game, plus they're the sixth best defense against the pass, allowing just 165 passing yards per game. But I think this is going to be a lower scoring game because both these teams are great defensively. But I'm going to take the Rams to get the win. I think their defense is slightly better. They're at home, and I trust their healthy offense more than I trust the banged up 49ers offense. So I'm going to take the Rams to continue their great start to the season and improve to 4-1. And I've got the Rams beating the 49ers by a score of 21-13. Moving on, we have the Vikings versus the Browns in London. So the Vikings, they're playing their second straight game in Europe, as last week they lost to the Steelers in Ireland, and now they're in London. And they play a Browns team that's not great. Although the Browns, they're making a big move for this week, as they've named Dylan Gabriel their starting quarterback, and they're benching Joe Flacco. And this is the second week in a row we've seen a team turn to their rookie quarterback looking for a spark. As last week the Giants did it with Jackson Dart, and it worked. So we'll have to see if the same thing happens for the Browns. And a fun fact about Dylan Gabriel, he's actually the first quarterback in NFL history to make his first career start outside of the United States. So just a fun fact there. But Gabriel's really going to need to provide a spark for this Browns offense because they have not been good, scoring just 14 points per game, which is one of the worst in the NFL. And on top of that, they now have to face a great Vikings defense that is allowing about 20 points per game. Then on the flip side, the Vikings offense also hasn't been amazing, but they haven't been terrible. They're likely going to be starting Carson Wentz for the third straight week, as JJ McCarthy is still dealing with an ankle injury. And Wentz, he's been okay for the Vikings, with 4 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in his 2 starts combined. But Wentz in the offense, they face a Browns defense that's actually pretty solid, as they've allowed the fewest yards per game in the NFL at 222. But this is an interesting game, and a game where I definitely think it's possible the Browns get the win. I think if their defense can keep this low scoring, I think Dylan Gabriel and the offense can do enough to get the win. But I'm still going to take the Vikings. They're the better overall team, and I just trust them a little bit more, and I've got the Vikings with the win by a score of 22-16. Moving on, we have the Colts hosting the Raiders. The Colts, they're coming off their first loss season, as last week they lost to the Rams, and then they'll face a struggling Raiders team that's lost 3 games in a row. Although, while the Raiders did lose last week, they lost a very close game, and they also got Ashton Jeanty going, which is definitely going to be big for the offense. As last week, Jeanty ran for 138 yards and 3 touchdowns. But while Jeanty was good, Geno Smith was terrible last week with 3 picks, and he now leads the NFL with 7 interceptions. And that's not a good recipe for success, and that is definitely not a good matchup this week, because this is a Colts team that's done a pretty good job with a +3 turnover differential, which is tied for 6th best in the NFL. And the Colts defense, they're also great against the run, allowing under 100 rushing yards per game. So while Jeanty was great last week, it could be a little tough for him this week. Now, on the offensive side of the ball for the Colts, they've been playing really well, as they're 4th in the NFL with 30.8 points per game, and they've also run the ball extremely effectively, as Jonathan Taylor leads the NFL with 414 rushing yards. And this is the Colts offense. They face a Raiders defense that has allowed some points, allowing about 25 points per game. But this is a game where it feels like it could be a tricky game for the Colts because they're coming off their first loss. The Raiders lost a close one last week and could potentially win. And I definitely think the Raiders could win this game if they can find success on the ground. But I'm just going to take the Colts. They're at home. I trust them more. I don't trust the Raiders with how often they turn the ball over. And I'm going to take the Colts to get a nice bounce back win and win by a score of 26-19. Moving on, we have the Giants at the Saints. So the Saints, they're still looking for their first win of the season as they're sitting at 0-4, but they have a chance to do that this week as they face the Giants. Although the Giants, they played really well last week in their upset win over the Chargers, and I definitely think they can carry that over into this week's game. But the offense for the Giants last week looked pretty good in Jackson Dart's first start, and I definitely think the offense could have another good game facing a Saints defense that's not exactly great, having allowed over 30 points in back-to-back games. Although I do think it will be very interesting to see how the Giants offense looks with no Malik Neighbors. Now, on the flip side, the Saints offense has not been good. They've scored more than 20 points just once this season, and on the year, they're scoring just 16.5 points per game. And that is not a great match for the Saints because they now face a Giants defense that was great last week and is pretty good. But this game, it definitely could go either way. It's definitely an opportunity for the Saints to get their first win, playing a Giants team that's not great, plus they're at home. But I'm going to take the Giants to get the win. I think Jackson Dart and the offense continue to build on their performance from last week. I think the defense plays well, and I've got the Giants winning back-to-back games and beating the Saints by a score of 24-13. Next game, we have the Cowboys at the Jets. The Jets, they might be terrible. They're 0-4, and they have not played well. And then for the Cowboys, they're 1-2-1, and last week they tied the Packers. And in last week's game, the Cowboys offense played pretty well with 40 points, and they did so against a really tough defense. And that is their second 40-point performance this season. And I definitely think the Cowboys offense can continue to play well, because they face a Jets defense that on paper is good, although they've been very disappointing, allowing 30 points per game. Now, offense for the Jets, they also haven't been great, but I do think they could have a big game playing a Cowboys defense that isn't exactly good, as they're second worst in the NFL, allowing 33 points per game. But this is a game where I think it's going to be a higher scoring game because neither team is very good defensively. But I'm going to take the Cowboys to get the win. They got the better offense. I don't think the Jets will be able to keep up, and I've got the Cowboys by a score of 34-26. Up next, we have the Broncos at the Eagles. So this is an interesting game. The Eagles, they're still undefeated as they're 4-0, and last week they beat the Buccaneers. And the Broncos, they're 2-2, and last week they got a much-needed win over the Bengals. Now, on the offensive side of the ball for the Broncos, they've been pretty solid, scoring 24 points per game, and they were great last week with 28. But they now face an Eagles defense that is okay, as on paper they're pretty good, although they've given up some points so far this season, allowing 22 points per game, and they've allowed at least 25 points in each of their last two. Now, on the flip side, the Eagles' offense hasn't been anything too impressive, which is 251 total yards per game, and that is actually third worst in the NFL, although they're finding ways to score, as they're still averaging 27 points per game. Although, finding ways to score could be tough against this Broncos defense, which is second in the NFL, allowing just 16.8 points per game. But this is a tough game to predict, and I can definitely see this game going either way. The Eagles, they're yet to play a full 4 quarters yet this season, and I do think that's eventually going to hurt them, and I do think that could be this week, especially in a game where the game's probably going to be pretty low scoring with how good both teams' defenses are. But the Broncos, they've been a little disappointing so far. I still don't completely trust their offense, so I am going to take the Eagles to get the win. But I would not be shocked if the Broncos, but I've got the Eagles by a score of 24-21. Moving on, we have the Dolphins at the Panthers. So the Dolphins, they're coming with their first win of the season, as last week they beat the Jets. And the Panthers, they're 1-3, and they just got destroyed by the Patriots last week, losing 42-13. But this game, that could really go either way, because I don't think either team is that good. On the offensive side of the ball for the Dolphins, they've been okay, scoring 20.8 points per game, and they face a Panthers defense that's not the greatest, allowing about 24 points per contest. And then on the flip side, the Panthers offense hasn't been too good, which is 18.8 points per game, although they face a Dolphins defense that also hasn't been great, allowing 29.5 points per game. But this is a game where I really have no idea who to take. Neither team is very good, and because that could really go either way. I think this game is going to be close, and I'm going to take the Dolphins to get the win. I think they can build on what they did last week, although it will be tough without Tyreek Hill. But I'm going to take the Dolphins in a close one, 26-24, but I really have no idea who's winning this game. Up next, we have the Ravens hosting the Texans. So this is another interesting game. The Texans, they've not been good so far this season, as they're just 1-3, although they got their first win of the season last week, as they easily beat the Titans. And then they'll face a Ravens team that has also been disappointing, also sitting at 1-3. But this is a Ravens team in a really tough spot, because they just got destroyed last week by the Chiefs, and half their team is hurt, as they have 11 starters listed on the injury report this week. And that includes Lamar Jackson, Roquan Smith, Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, and a ton of others. But those four I mentioned, obviously, are all key players for the Ravens and are all unlikely to play. Now, on the offensive side of the ball for the Ravens, I think this could be tough, because they're playing with their backup quarterback in Cooper Rush, and on top of that, they're facing the number one scoring defense in the NFL, as Texans are allowing just 12.8 points per game, and they didn't allow a single point last week. Now, on the flip side, the Texans' offense isn't as banged up as the Ravens, although they've still struggled to generate points, scoring just 16 points per game. Although they played well last week, scoring 26, and I could see that continuing against a Ravens defense that already isn't good. Now they're riddled with injuries as well, as the Ravens on the season are allowing 33.3 points per game, worse than the NFL. But this game would be a lot different if the Ravens were actually healthy, but because they're not, I'm going to take the Texans to get the win, and I've got the Texans very easily, 26-13. Next game, we have the Titans at the Cardinals. So the Cardinals, they're now 2-2 after they started 2-0, and they have a good chance to get back to their winning ways as they face the Titans, who are still winless this season. And the Titans also haven't been very competitive as they have the worst point differential in the NFL at minus 69. But on the offensive side of the ball for the Cardinals, they've been okay, although pretty inconsistent so far this season, scoring about 20.5 points per game. Although I do think they have a good chance to have a good offensive performance as they face a Titans defense that's not very good, allowing 30 points per game. And then on the flip side, the Titans offense also is not good, as they're scoring just 12.8 points per game, and they were shut out last week. And on top of that, they now face a good Cardinals defense that's allowing 18.5 points per game. Well, I have the Cardinals getting the win here fairly easily. They're at home. I think their defense controls this game. Their offense plays fairly well, and the Cardinals win by a score of 24-10. Next game, we have the Buccaneers at the Seahawks. So this is an interesting game. Both these teams have been playing pretty well, and they're both 3-1. And this game should be pretty entertaining. On the offensive side of the ball for the Buccaneers, they've been playing well, scoring 24.3 points per game, and Baker Mayfield is tied for third in the NFL with 8 touchdown passes. But the Buccaneers offense, they face a great Seahawks defense that is tied for second best in the NFL, as they're allowing just 16.8 points per game, and haven't allowed more than 20 points a game yet this season. Now, on the flip side, the Seahawks offense has also been great, as they're 6th in the NFL, scoring 27.8 points per game. But they face a Buccaneers defense that is allowing 24.3 points per game. And something to note about this game is both the Bucs defense and Seahawks defenses are great against the run. But this is a really tough game to predict, and I think it could go either way. I would lean towards the Seahawks because they're at home, although they're actually worse at home than on the road. As since the start of last season, Seahawks are 9-1 on the road and just 4-7 at home. So that definitely makes things interesting. But on top of the Seahawks not being great at home, I also trust Baker Mayfield more than I would trust Sam Darnold. So I'm going to take the Buccaneers to get the win in a good game, 23-20. But this game can definitely go either way. Moving on, we have the Lions at the Bengals. So this game should not be close. The Lions, they're 3-1, and they've won 3 in a row. And the Bengals, they've lost back-to-back games after their 2-0 start. And this is just a terrible matchup for the Bengals. Their defense is terrible, allowing 29.8 points per game, and they don't have to try to stop the number one scoring offense in the NFL, as the Lions are averaging 34.3 points per game. And the Bengals offense, they're just not going to be able to keep up, as they've scored 13 combined points in the 2 games without Joe Burrow, and that is just not going to be enough to cut it against the Lions. But the Lions, they might win this game by 100. I don't have a ton to say about this game. I've got the Lions big, 37-6. Up next, we have the Commanders at the Chargers. So this is another interesting game. The Chargers, they're 3-1 and looking to bounce back after they lost to the Giants last week. And the Commanders, they're 2-2 after a loss to the Falcons. Although in that game for the Commanders, they did not have Jaden Daniels, but he's going to be back for this week's game. And that is big for the Commanders' offense because they face a great Charger defense that is allowing just 17.8 points per game, which is 4th best in the NFL. Now, on the flip side, the Chargers' offense is scoring 22 points per game, although I am a little worried about their offensive line without Joe Alt, because they've really struggled once he left the game with injury. But the Chargers' offense, they face the Commanders' defense that's not amazing, allowing 22.8 points per game, and the Commanders also really struggle to stop the pass, allowing nearly 250 passing yards per game, which ranks 6th worst in the NFL. But this is a game that could go either way. I don't exactly trust the Chargers after they lost to the Giants, although I also haven't really been too impressed by the Commanders. But I'm going to take the Chargers to get the win here. I think as long as Justin Herbert has time to throw, I think he'll pick apart this Commanders defense that's not great against the pass. And I think that's going to lead the Chargers to get the win. Plus, they've got the better defense and they're at home. So I've got the Chargers in a close game by a score of 22-18. Up next, we have the Patriots at the Bills on Sunday Night Football. And we'll have a live watch party for this game that will start at about 8:15 Eastern Time on Sunday, so I hope to see you guys there. But the Bills, they're one of 2 undefeated teams in the NFL, and they play a solid Patriots team sitting at 2-2. And last week the Patriots destroyed the Panthers, winning by 29. But this is definitely a tough test for the Patriots. On the offensive side of the ball for the Patriots, they've been playing well. They scored 42 points last week, and on the season they're scoring 25 points per game. But they don't have to face a pretty solid Bills defense that is allowing 22.5 points per game. Now, on the offensive side of the ball for the Bills, they've been great. They're second in the NFL, scoring 33.3 points per game, and they've been great running the football with 165 rushing yards per game. But they faced a Patriots defense that is allowing just 20.3 points per game, and they've been one of the best defenses against the run, as they're actually second, allowing 77.5 rushing yards per game. But this is a game that I think is going to be a little bit closer than some people think. It's not a terrible matchup for the Patriots, and I wouldn't be shocked to see them with the upset win. Well, I'm still going to take the Bills to get the win. I think they're the better overall team, and they're at home. And even if they don't run the football too effectively, they've still got Josh Allen. I think he leads the Bills to the win, and I've got the Bills by a score of 27-21. And our final game, we've got the Chiefs at the Jaguars on Monday Night Football. And we will also have a live watch for this game starting about 8:15 Eastern Time on Monday, so I hope to see you guys there. But this is another interesting game. The Jaguars, they've looked pretty good so far this season, as they're 3-1, and they just beat the 49ers last week. But they don't face a Chiefs team that's won 2 straight after an 0-2 start, and they were great last week, playing easily their best game of the season as they destroyed the Ravens. But on the offensive side of the ball for the Chiefs, they played really well last week with 37 points, and they were really helped out by the return of Xavier Worthy. And now that Worthy's back healthy, I think this Chiefs offense is going to continue to play pretty well. Although they do get a tough test this week, facing a Jaguars defense that is allowing 18 points per game. Now, on the flip side, the Jaguars' offense has been solid, scoring 24 points per game, and they've run the ball really effectively behind Travis Etienne, who's third in the NFL with 394 rushing yards, and also leads the NFL with 6.1 yards per carry, minimum 25 carries. But the Jaguars' offense, they face a Chiefs defense that is solid, allowing 19 points per game, while the Chiefs, they're not good against the run, allowing 127 rushing yards per game and 4.9 yards per carry. But this is another game that I think could be a little closer than some people think, and I definitely think the Jaguars are good enough to get the win, especially if they continue to run the football effectively. Well, I'm going to take the Chiefs to get the win. I trust Patrick Mahomes in this offense now that Xavier Worthy's back healthy. And I'm going to take the Chiefs to get the win in a close game, 23-21. But I wouldn't be that surprised if the Jaguars do end up with the upset. Well, those are my Week 5 NFL predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible. Be sure to check out the community tab of my channel, where you guys can vote on who you think will win some of this week's big games. But that's all for this video. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.